Good evening. Good evening. I am happy to be here tonight. I love you, and and I always enjoy being with you. So, thank you for joining me and making me happy, or contributing to my happiness. I really get that happiness is a choice, and I choose to be happy with you, Steve. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. You were missed. Happy, happy, happy that you are here. Um, how's it going out there in the wild, wild world? I haven't actually been out of the house much since February sometime. The doctor in the house recognized very early on, before they even were talking about stay at home, that since I fall into a couple of the classifications that they talk about, that we'd better stay home, and I in particular had better stay home. So I've been doing that. I went out once to go to the DMV, and I got one of those new licenses that what's it called? A real license. So I guess we haven't been having real licenses before. Anyway, I got a real license. It was weird being at the DMV because they had just that week gone into making appointments, and you couldn't be there if you didn't have an appointment. And apparently I was the only one in the city of Ventura who had an appointment at that moment in time. Someone was just ahead of me, and someone came in just as I was leaving. But basically I had the entire DMV all to myself, which is weird, really weird. I mean, when we're used to packs of people and chairs filled with people, all of whom look like they've been waiting for hours and hours, to be the only one to walk right up to a window and have them say, thank you, may I have this, take that over there, go have your picture taken. I was in and out in maybe 7 minutes, probably no more than that. And and my little thing came in the mail just as it would have if I had faced the big crowds. But it was spectacular. It was a life altering experience. And then I drove home and went back into the house. I have been out two other occasions since then. I get in the car, we drive to the frozen yogurt shop. Cat goes in and gets the yogurt, brings it out. We eat it in the car, so I feel like I'm really out. And then we go home. Gratefully, I love my home, and I love my pets, and I love being here, and I really so far don't mind at all. Get out of a lot of work. Now, a lot of new work comes in. We wash the stuff when it comes back from the grocery store and whatnot, but it's not the same. So life is different. There's a new normal, and I don't really object to it too terribly much. So, how are you all doing? Thank you, Lainey. Good evening, Dana. Steve's life is good and he's good in it. Well, I would expect nothing less than that. Good evening, Laura. Happy Wednesday, Jefferson. Oh, ever so glad to have you here. Good evening, Kirk.
It's Kirk's birthday, or was yesterday.
Kirk? Do we have a birthday boy? Was it, is it today or was it yesterday? While you're typing in your answer. Susan the cat has a cold. The same cat now has a cold and is terribly congested and has moved back into the rug in my bathroom and snivels and snorts and carries on. And doesn't eat a lot, and I think it's because he can't smell his food, and so if he can't smell it, he thinks I'm poisoning him or something. Um, but otherwise, I mean, he's in good spirits. He's just kind of lagging around and snivelly, very snivelly, and stuffed up. You can hear his nose being stuffed up when he's breathing. I mean, it's kind of hard on him, I think. So he's moved back into my bathroom. That's where he's happy, and he comes down to eat. So I figure as long as he's eating, we're still kind of okay. Things are good. Ginger's having a cold beer with us. Yay! Good for Ginger. I'm having my hot tea with lemon and honey and all kinds of
Peggy's here.
good keep the pipes open stuff.
Peggy's here.
Peggy's here. Okay. Yesterday was Kirk's birthday. Kirk, I'd sing to you, but I don't want to spoil your birthday. So will you just settle for some happy birthday greetings, and we'll work on the song. Everybody kind of think happy birthday for Kirk and wish him happy birthday wishes and happy birthday prayers. Hard lemonade for Ginger, for Jennifer. I love it. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kirk. Happy birthday to you. There, I hope that didn't spoil it. I have a sweet little voice. Bleh. Well, hail, hail. The gang is mostly here. I love that. I love that. I love spending Wednesday evening with you guys. You know, Wednesday really is kind of hump day, isn't it? I mean, the week has started and it's going however it's going, and you can kind of see the end of it at the end of the tunnel. But Wednesday for me is always okay, let's get this act together, let's get things organized, and then all of a sudden I find things I need to organize. And what kind of fun is that anyway? Um, I've been doing several tarot readings this week, which has been really interesting. Turns out I'm good at it. I love that. For me, it's another way to minister to people that might not go to church or might not even tune in on a Wednesday night, but it's a way to talk to them about their mindset and the way they think and how that's working in their lives. So I enjoy that very much, as a matter of fact. So let's see. We've all wished Kirk happy birthday. Thank you all for joining me. And Kirk, I hope it really was, because you're just the greatest, and we want that for you. And Ginger, how's that beer going? Oh, somehow it sounds really good. I've got the fan on over here because I get warm. I run hot anyway, but I get warm, and then we put all these lights on me, and then it's really warm, so the little fan goes. So if you see my hair blowing in the breeze, it is not for dramatic effect. It is so that I don't drip all over everything and stay cool and enjoy my time with you. So let's see. Why don't I just get to it? Shall I just get to it and then we can talk?
Yeah.
Let's do that. So, I meander around the web when I get bored. I just kind of pick a word or check something out and then see what happens. And, excuse me, in my meanderings around the web this week, I rediscovered St. John of the Cross. Now, I'm not sure how I got there, which usually indicates to me that I am exactly where I am supposed to be. But in my reading, I found this poem. And it really is beautiful. And surprisingly, for me, I only object to one word in it. See if you can figure out which word that is. Here's the poem, or part of one. And I saw the river over which every soul must pass to reach the kingdom of heaven. And the name of that river was suffering. And I saw a boat which carries souls across the river And the name of that boat was Love. Pretty cool, huh? Did you find the word? Cax raising her hand. We'll get to it in a minute. St. John of the Cross is, I suppose, a doctor of the Catholic Church. And one of the most prolific writers of and for the Catholic Church. His writing is considered not only some of the greatest in the Church's library, but also some of the greatest in Spanish literature. The Dark Night, from which the phrase the dark night of the soul takes its name, is a writing of St. John of the Cross. And it tells of the journey of the soul from its bodily home to union with God. According to his writing, this journey happens in the dark. The dark represents the hardships and difficulties that are met in detachment from the world and reaching the light of union with the Creator. There are several steps during this state of darkness, which are described in successive stanzas. The main idea behind the poem is to teach the painful experience required to attain spiritual maturity and union with God. So, again, reserving the right to disagree. According to an article I read online, there are some signs you can look for, some signs and symptoms that you may experience or can expect to experience in the dark night of the soul. Let me share them with you. The first is things that you once accepted no longer serve you. This could, the author says, be anything from a relationship, a job, or a living situation. You may feel the need to leave these situations immediately. Number 2, you start cleaning. I'm not making this up. Decluttering, physically detoxing, saging, or using purifying essential oils for no apparent reason. Sometimes, the writer writes, this is not St. John of the Cross, sometimes as we ascend, we might do this naturally when there is a full or a new moon to clean energy, or due to some other astrological event. But if there is no astrological connection, or if the clearing seems more extensive than usual, this could signal a dark night of the soul. It could also signal spring, but that's beside the point. 3, you feel extremely exhausted. Now, I kind of think that's redundant, because if exhausted is about as tired as you can get, extremely exhausted is overmuch. Anyway, the author says your body is healing and attuning to a higher frequency. It needs time to rest in order to make the necessary changes to attune to the light. Give yourself some downtime to allow the process to go quickly and smoothly. Number 4, plainly stated, you feel horrible, physically and emotionally. I won't lie, he says. A dark night of the soul can be a painful process and experience. You might feel terrible. And so, going back to point number 3, rest is needed. You may experience anxiety, depression, loneliness, fear, grief. All of these are lower vibration emotions that are coming to the surface in order to be purged. 5. There's only 5 points from this author. You feel guided to do shadow work. This is the inner healing work that clears and heals out negative emotions and traumas from the past. It allows for the darkness, also known as your shadow, to be cleared so that you will vibrate at a higher and lighter frequency. Okay, so that was the author's experience. And I'm not going to argue with these points. I simply reserve the right to disagree with some of them. And part of that is the author's insistence that this has to be a horrendous experience. Now, yes, spiritual awakening can be painful both physically and emotionally, because we shed away many of the constructs, beliefs, and patterns that we have surrounded ourselves with, identified with, or accumulated over the course of a lifetime, or many lifetimes if you choose. And sometimes many lifetimes are all lived at once. We've all been there, haven't we? And while there are more than a few experts in the field that believe that suffering is a necessary prerequisite to entering the kingdom of heaven, I just don't necessarily agree. Have you figured out what the word was in the poem that I disagreed with? Suffering. I don't believe, in spite of the story of the fall of Adam and Eve and what was put upon them by God for being naughty, I don't believe that God ever meant that we should suffer. Ernest Holmes devotes a fair amount of space in The Science of Mind to the topic of suffering. But page 109 sums it all up pretty well if you want to check me out. He says, and I quote, "Man is created with the possibility of limitless freedom, and let alone to discover himself," which is a bit like a fish discovering water. On the road to self-discovery, Holmes says, he must be subject to the law of reality. And if in ignorance he violates this law, he must thereby suffer. This is not, however, because any divine decree ordains suffering, but simply because it is the necessity of the case. If you drop a glass, it will fall to the ground, not as a punishment, not because you've been bad, not because you were evil, but because it is the necessity of the case. Gravity pulls things to the ground, okay? God, Holmes says, back to Holmes, never intended man to suffer. Suffering may be salutary in that it leads us to a place where we learn that it is unnecessary. We will cease to suffer as we more and more comply with the laws of the universe. All suffering is the result of some infringement of these laws. It is a solace to the mind when we come to understand that all human limitation, from the standpoint of the divinity within us, is unnecessary. There's a whole lot of difference in our thinking when we think that suffering is its own reality, like believing in the devil. And when we come to understand that we simply have the possibility of experiencing it, well, that's a whole different thing, isn't it? Then we realize that we're at choice. Holmes again. The universe does not demand suffering. Suffering is man-made. Through ignorance, it will continue until we learn how to make it optional. or obliterated altogether in our experience. Someday, Holmes writes, someday we shall decide that we have had enough suffering. You know, there's an old Buddhist saying, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. So, with Holmes and Buddha at my back and a pen in my hand, I decided to do a little rewrite on St. John of the Cross's poem. A small correction to the poem. I believe where he is now, he will see the wisdom of the change. And agree with me. The poem is still every bit as lovely, I believe. Simply, to my thinking, which seems to be in agreement with the teachings of the very early church, or more specifically the teaching of Jesus, it makes more sense with my little tiny rewrite. So for me now, it reads like this. And I saw the river over which every soul must pass to reach the kingdom of heaven. And the name of that river was life. And I saw a boat which carries the soul across the river. And the name of that boat was love. So let's talk love for a moment. Because love is, after all, the great motivator, isn't it? Love makes us do things we might never do otherwise. Now, I'm not talking romantic love. I'm not talking kissy face, cry yourself to sleep if it doesn't work out perfectly love. I'm talking real, heartfelt love, caring, compassion, something within us that commands us to do good, to sacrifice, to face danger if necessary, for a person or a group of people or a cause, for humanity. Love motivates us to action. It compels us to listen. Love asks us to forgive for its own sake. Love begs us to understand. And because we love, we are better than we would be otherwise. Love creates passion. And according to the poster on my wall, passion is the very fact of God in man and women. So there is a river we cross, and it is life. And there is a boat that takes us across that river to the kingdom of heaven. And surely that boat is love. St. John of the Cross got that part right. I just don't believe we have to suffer. I believe suffering is optional. Susan, quoting Yoda. Thank you, Susan. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. See, I'm not alone in this. Me and Yoda, we're a team. Me and Yoda and Susan. who can quote him. See, I think all too often we really do think that suffering is just has to be a part of the human experience. Buddha says no. It's optional. Suffering is optional. Pain will happen. Suffering is optional. Ernest Holmes says we will reach a day when we have had enough suffering. I'm just turning the sound up a little bit here. I really do dislike that noise. It doesn't make me angry, and it's not going to lead to hate, because I don't want to suffer.
You said that I come that you might have life more abundantly. There's no suffering.
That's right. That's right. Cactus shared Steve's post, if you haven't seen it. It says, Jesus said, I come that you might have life more abundant. It doesn't say, I come that you should suffer. In fact, Jesus is pretty clear about the fact that life is meant to be good, that life is meant to be abundant and joyous and love-filled. Paul got a little bit in the way of some of that, kind of took it back a couple of centuries, I think. But, you know, he did some pretty good stuff too, so we'll cut him a little bit of slack. But I just don't believe, I'm not sure how it got from Jesus' teaching to St. John of the Cross saying that life is about suffering. He was a student of Teresa of Avila. And I don't know, I guess suffering was just in then. Maybe it was part of the mindset that by that point. But how sad. It is not what Jesus taught. It is not. Love one another, he said. Didn't say suffer. He was pretty good. He lined a lot of stuff up. Do good, follow the commandments, and let me give you one more. Love each other. Nowhere in any of that does it say you have to suffer or that you must suffer or that God wishes suffering upon you. Now, that is kind of an Old Testament thought. I will give you that. It is said, you will remember if you remember the story. If not, it's easy to find. It's in the first few pages of the Bible. In Genesis, it says that when Adam and Eve were thrown out of the garden because of the whole apple thing, that they were going to have to suffer now. I don't believe every word of that story either. Although it's a very good story and it makes several good points. I just don't think that's one of them. So, what do you think? What do you think? Are we supposed to suffer? Are we meant to suffer? Does God want us to suffer? And if so, why? What would be the point? If God is love and God wants us to love God, then why? Susan wants to know if I ever read runes. Cat does. I don't, but she does. And on her list of books, when she's finished writing the one she's writing now, is a book on runes for women, I believe, isn't it specifically? So Susan, stay in touch with CAC on that. She's real good with it. Let's see, what do you guys say? Yeah, Lainey likes that I quoted Ernie. I quote Ernie all the time. I do. I don't always give him credit. But then, he quoted Emerson all the time, didn't always give Emerson credit. So I figure we're kind of even and it's okay. I don't know, Steve. Maybe he did mean talk about the boat in the river. But he does very specifically say, and the name of the river is suffering. So I just can't go along with him. You guys are fooling around out there. I can see you doing that. Great, Kirk, yes. Suffering is a personal choice. When you have a headache, you can choose to take an aspirin or suffer with the discomfort. What are you going to do? Are you going to take what is available to you to lift you out of the suffering? Whether that's prayer or affirmation or an aspirin, um, or you're going to choose to suffer. Now, we have all, I am sure, seen people who choose to suffer, who seem to wallow in it, wallow in the suffering. They enjoy their suffering. And I guess if they enjoy it, well, fine, if that's what they want to do. I just don't choose to go there. And I don't think any of you would either. Although occasionally we will for a while, won't we? Without even realizing that we're doing it. We will be in the suffering, be in the pain, be in the discomfort. Um, and then, there's the old yourself across the head and say, oh, I could have prayed. Or I could have done an affirmation. I could have remembered what the truth of me is rather than sitting here in this thing I'm wallowing in, whatever it may be. See, I think all too often we frankly jump out of the boat into the river and decide to stay there and then wonder why we're all wet. Just a thought. Just a thought. I'm losing my techie over here for a minute while she goes down and checks on something. Um, so, is there anything we want to say while she's not here and talk behind her back? Oh, let's see. I've got this thing kind of moving. Steve, I just caught your second thought in there, and I love it. Steve says suffering comes to me when I try to avoid the facts that might bring me temporary displeasure. Boy, isn't that true? Isn't that true for all of us? I think, but we don't always look at it. And certainly, Steve, you've nailed it there. How often are we uncomfortable because there is something we need to do, need to look at, need to see, need to pay attention to, and we don't want to because we think it's going to hurt or we think it's going to change things, God forbid, um, or we just think it's going to be unpleasant. When you have to go talk to the boss about his attitude or talk to your children about what they're doing, and you just think, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to rock the boat. This is just going to be horrible. And and so we suffer. We get to sit there in our suffering because we're not doing what we know we need to do. So here's some advice, spiritual or otherwise, and that's do what you know you need to do. Susan says the word suffer is such a hard and angry word to hear, isn't it? I could say it in my Moses voice. Suffer. And it sounds like it's an order, doesn't it? Sounds like something you're going to have to do. Love, she says, is a much softer, whimsical sounding word. It is that, and it is delightful, and it is heartwarming. Yes, Kirk, being one of those as well. Suffering is kind of taught to you as the way to heaven. Um, Lainey says we are here to learn lessons, and if we do it with love as the intention, lessons learned much quicker than on to the next. I think that's true. I think that's true. There is something that happens when we come from love, something that happens within us and around us and through us when our intention is to express love. That changes things. So if we go to the boss or we go to the kids or we go wherever it is we're going to do this thing that we've been probably avoiding and over in which we are suffering, um, if we go with the intention of doing it from love, of coming from love, coming from caring, compassion, understanding, it changes the whole scenario. It changes everything. I once had an office manager who I had to let go. Why is not important. Um, but I had to let her go mostly because she needed to get on with her life and do what her heart was calling her to do, and she was avoiding that. So I think she was suffering, and I needed to set her free. So we sat down and we had a talk, the end of which, of course, was, so I'm letting you go to get on with your life, to express your divinity in a way that this particular position doesn't seem to give you the opportunity to do. She told me later she had never felt so good about being fired, that it was the most amazing and wonderful experience, and that she was excited about getting out and doing more, doing what she was supposed to be doing what she was meant to do. And the only difference really is that instead of coming from, I need to get rid of her, I came from a different perspective. It came with the intention of love. And it changed her life, and quite honestly, changed mine as well. So, yes, Lainey, intention, love as an intention changes everything. And Steve says, sometimes I think there's a tendency toward the idea that unearned happiness, happiness that you haven't earned through pain and suffering, is not real. Yeah, I think sometimes some people feel that way. But it feels so good to be happy, doesn't it? When the Thomas Fire took most of our neighborhood and left us pretty much intact, a lot of work to do, but the house pretty much intact, and we still had all of our belongings that were inside the house. I spent a little bit of time thinking about whether or not I was going to have survivor's guilt. And Cac and I talked about it, and ultimately we decided that we were spared for a reason and a purpose. And that there was no reason to feel guilty in that. There was simply work to do. So we didn't have to feel bad about still having our house. We didn't have to feel bad about not having a home of our own for 2.5 years now, some of these people. Because we have work to do. And apparently, we needed all of our stuff to do it. I can't imagine instantly why needing all of our stuff to do it would be true. But nonetheless, we've got it. Stephen, I just read the last one. Can I say that out loud? The Stations of the Cross, yes, meant to what? Make you feel guilty. Meant to make you feel, meant to make you appreciate the suffering that Jesus went through at the end, and to remember that he did it all for you. So it would be good if you suffered too, I think. Hmm? So, since this group is clearly not into suffering, yes, Lainey, Jesus on the cross looks like a lot of suffering. When my mother was in the hospital the last time, she always went to St. Joseph's in Burbank because it was the closest hospital. And she was in the hospital a lot, a lot. Um, and they have crosses, crucifixes on the walls in every single room, I believe. Certainly in all the rooms she was in, and she was in many of them. And we were standing there one night talking, and she looked up at the cross. And my mother, who never went to church when she was younger, never took me to church. I took myself to church. She made me go to church, but she never did. My mother looked up at the cross, the crucifix, and said, "Isn't it beautiful?" And I said, "I don't think so." And she looked horrified. And she said, "But it's so beautiful." And I said, "He looks like he's suffering. I don't see a lot of beauty in that." I'd like to say Mother and I agreed to disagree, but I'm not sure she agreed at all. I think she was afraid that I was probably going to go to hell. But that was her thought, and not mine. So I think we should do a bit of a meditation and then pray. Partially because, if for no other reason than because I promised Susan that we would do the gold mist meditation that we did a couple of weeks ago, that I borrowed from Andrew Harvey with, again, a couple of changes because I do that. You all know that I do that. So we had been talking that evening about using your name for God in this meditation. And I'm going to invite you to recall what that is for you. The name that, if God is your favorite name for God, then certainly use that. But for some people, that rekindles old memories, old traditional memories of old teachings. And so if you have another name for God, if you like universe or love, or whatever your word may be, use that. And let's just take a moment now and close your eyes if that's comfortable. Or just soft focus so that your awareness is within and not caught up in the busyness of the world around you. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And repeating for your name for God silently, I invite you to, at your own pace, breathe in a deep, dazzling, golden mist. a mist as bright and powerful as the sun. Again, thinking of your name for God, breathe in the splendid golden mist. And with each inhalation, allow that mist to fill your body and become you. At your own pace, breathe in the golden mist. Let it fill all the dark places, all the lonely places. And when you exhale now, breathe out fear, confusion, limitation, everything and anything that stands in the way of your recognition of yourself as a divine being, a being filled with light and love and understanding and power and beauty. Breathe in the golden mist and be filled with it. And breathe out those other things with the same power that you breathed in. Again. Again. And again. Breathe in the golden mist. Breathe out the fear. And again. Breathing out powerfully until there is simply none of that remaining in you. There is a transformational alchemy taking place. You are changing, turning dross to gold. Again, thinking the name of God. Breathe in the dazzling golden mist. And breathe out once and for all any remaining doubt or fear. And know that in doing so, you are transformed. These times, these sometimes painful and confusing times, do not require suffering. Instead, they invite alchemical transformation, turning the dross of our fear into the gold of our visions. Turning our pain to understanding. In these times, we can connect with the unlimited, infinite power And when we do that, we will discover that it has been within us all along. May we all be transformed by the realization of our divinity and the renewing of our minds. And so it is. So, pain happens. Pain happens. Everything from stubbing our toes to dealing with a sick child or a dying pet. It hurts our heart. Pain happens. And because we are human, we experience the pain. And that is good, I think. Pain teaches. And Steve, yes, there is a lot to unpack around the idea. I believe a lot of why we think we deserve it, that it's a requirement, is what we're taught when we're younger. It's the interpretation that the people who followed gave to the early teachings. I pray that each of us goes away tonight with a different understanding. That we can then transform into action in the world. I don't suggest that if someone looks at you with tears in their eyes and says, "I'm suffering," that you say, "No, you're not. You're just in pain." But I would hope when someone says that you find a way of understanding them and speaking to them coming from love. Because it makes all the difference. Love removes judgment. Love lives in that field that Rumi talked about, beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. It lives there. It's a magical thing. I love your comments. Thank you. We are in this together. We can make a difference. So your homework assignment for this week is to come from love. And if you find yourself coming from something else, judging, righteous judgment, or coming from knowing it all or knowing better or just having to be right. Take a deep breath. Just take a moment. You can take a deep breath without anyone even noticing that you're doing it. And imagine when you take that deep breath that that you are breathing in that golden mist again, and that you are quickly charging yourself up with it. And then come from that place in your dealings, in your actions, in your communications. Come from that gold mist filled place that is a recognition of your divinity. It will change things. And when we change things, we have changed the world. There's much work to be done. We know that. We know that. Use the golden mist. It is there for you. And it will take you to a place beyond understanding. You know, the Bible talks about the peace that passes understanding. That's the place we're talking about. That place within you that is so filled with love, so filled with the gold mist of spirit and creation, that it is beyond even human understanding. And that's alchemical. That's magical. And you are magical. You are meant to be. My favorite card in the tarot deck is the Magician. Because he has, first of all, an infinity sign over his head, which is meant to explain that he is connected on all levels to the divine. That he understands, he gets it, he uses it. It's where his magic comes from. And just in case you missed the point, his right hand points straight up. Sometimes with a wand, sometimes not, depending upon which deck you're using, but his right hand is straight up, connected to the heavens. And his left hand points down to earth, as if to say, as above, so below. As in heaven, so on earth. As in your thinking, so in your life. How could you not love that card? Well, another Wednesday evening with those I love, talking about love, and perhaps just considering the fact that God never intended that we should suffer. And if we have brought this upon ourselves, then we can divest ourselves of it. So a loving week I wish for you. A week in which you both give and receive an abundance of love and joy and wonder. Thank you for your wonderful comments. They are deeply appreciated. I love you. Go have the most amazing week. Go change the world. What else have you got to do?